Stop the Nazi Games, indeed. Hallo allemaal, daar zijn we er weer. RHTV live vanuit het mooie Maastricht. Ja, en zoals altijd gaan we naar het nieuws kijken. En we gaan eerst even aanwijzen waar we zijn. Hier het mooie Maastricht. So hello to you all. We are streaming live from Maastricht, which is in the south of the Netherlands. And of course, we're going to talk politics and geopolitics. And first, we're going to look at an episode of the FVD Forum Inside, where they were talking about Pieter Omtzigt, right? And we basically have four parties. We have the PVV, Geert Wilders, the NSC, Pieter Omtzigt. We have the BBB, Caroline van der Plas, and the VVD, which, are supposed to come together to make a coalition, right? But Pieter Omtzigt, the NSC, stepped out. Now, the Forum for Democracy is a small political party, but they have a lot of people that watch them. And we're going to take a look at what Forum has to say about Pieter Omtzigt.
Toedraagt. Je kan dus op de shop.fvd.nl, klik je op Forum Insight, een shout-out bestellen, kost een tientje. Daarmee hou je ons in de lucht. Dan kunnen we weer wijn bestellen of mooie nieuwe camera's doen of onze technici betalen of bandwidth. Het zijn altijd dingen die daarbij komen kijken. Iedereen weet dat het is best duur om zo'n show in de lucht te houden. En dit helpt ons. Dus dank jullie wel daarvoor. Laten we even kijken naar wat Pieter Omtzigt deze week te zeggen had in het nieuws.
De meeste mensen willen een meerderheidskabinet hier de afgelopen 2 dagen zijn langsgekomen.
Wij, en volgens mij hebben er ook een aantal mensen gezegd dat ze niet in een kabinet willen. Wij zijn daar vrij helder in geweest. Op 29 november hebben we een brief geschreven dat we niet in over een meerderheidskabinet willen onderhandelen. We hebben na afronding van de eerste fase die over de rechtsstaat ging gezegd: het is en blijft voor onze positie. Wij gaan niet in een meerderheid of minderheidskabinet met deze 3 partijen. En dat hebben we in een brief aan de informateur op 7 februari nogmaals herhaald. Dus dat betekent dat alle partijen die hier aan tafel zijn...
Als dat zo is, meneer Omtzigt, waarom ga je dan überhaupt aan tafel zitten om te onderhandelen over een nieuw kabinet? Ja, je wist al dat je niet mee zou gaan doen met de PVV. Dat wist je al. De PVV is er wel de grootste partij geworden. Ja, dus waarom zit je dan aan de onderhandelingstafel? So this guy here, Omtzigt, says, we don't want to make a coalition this way or that way, But why are you on the negotiating table then? Right? Waarom zit hij aan de onderhandelingstafel als hij toch niet een coalitie wil maken?
Heel goed weten wat onze positie is. En dit hebben wij gedaan. Vergeet niet, wij hebben voor de verkiezingen gezegd: wij zien niet in hoe we in een kabinet gaan. Na die uitslag hebben wij een stap vooruit gemaakt. En hebben we gezegd, gezien de uitslag en kijkend hoe het mogelijk is om landsbestuur gewoon mogelijk te maken, om oplossingen voor problemen te doen, zeggen we van dan willen we echt wel een extra parlementair kabinet. Of we willen gewoon een gedoogakkoord waarin wij ook gewoon onszelf vastleggen hoe we daarmee omgaan.
Dus het blijft een nee voor een meerderheidskabinet of een minderheidskabinet met Geert Wilders. Dus dan blijft
dat is wat wij meegedeeld hebben. En dat heeft u gezien, zowel op 10 januari als op 7 februari.
Nou, vanmorgen...
Hij zoekt gewoon manieren om hier onderuit te komen. Ja. Dus, ja, wat kun je hiermee? Wat een lafzwanse zet. Dat is toch geen instelling? Je hebt een meerderheid van stemmen gekregen, meneer Omtzigt. Daar moet je ook goed mee omgaan. Niet op een lafzwanserige manier als dit. Dan ga je ook nog de limousine vragen van de formateur. Of de informateur. Plasterk. En ja, dan rij je in één keer weg. Ga je naar de media toe. Dat is toch...
hadden we Geert Wilders hier natuurlijk even.
Ja.
En toen was ook een vraag, wat nou als Omtzigt nee blijft zeggen tegen zo'n meerderheidsvariant? Hij zei, ja is ook een antwoord. Maar het antwoord is en blijft dus nee, wat dat betreft.
Wij hebben deze 2 brieven geschreven en daar verwijs ik u even naar.
Ralf?
Verschrikkelijk. Ja, goed. Naar mijn idee, ik heb die brieven niet in mijn hoofd zitten hoor, maar er wordt toch voortdurend gerechtvaardigd hoe je kunt draaien en hoe je een kabinet wat een keer wat vernieuwing tot stand kan brengen weer onmogelijk kunt maken. Dus dat hele rechtsstatelijkheidsgezeur is mij nooit helemaal duidelijk geworden. En nu is dat dan toch een soort handvat om niet in een meerderheidscoalitie te gaan. Ook niet te gedogen volgens mij. Of juist wel, nou ja, ik kom er niet uit. Deze man maakt het niet veel helderder wat mij betreft.
Ik vind het ook een beetje laf eigenlijk dat hij, een van de argumenten natuurlijk ook de financiële situatie van de overheid, dat hem zo tegenviel. Maar dan denk ik, nou dan neem je toch juist verantwoordelijkheid om dat aan te pakken en om dat te gaan verbeteren. Dan ga je toch niet zeggen, oh het staat er zo slecht voor, we doen maar niks.
Maar dat doet hij nu niet trouwens, hè? Dat noemt hij in dit verband niet.
Nou, hij zegt dat hij gewoon niet met de PVV een meerderheids- of minderheidskabinet wil. Ja.
Maar dat wilde hij voor de verkiezing ook niet.
Nee.
Dat was het hele plan ook helemaal niet.
Klopt.
Het hele plan. Ik heb 2 dagen na de verkiezingen in een andere krant een stukje geschreven over hoe ik dan die uitslag zag. Ik zei, nou ja, ze hebben met NSC en met Geert Wilders hebben ze de hele rechtervleugel afgetroefd. Nou, jullie zijn
Kleiner geworden.
Ja. En ze hebben Geert Wilders salonveeg gemaakt in die weken voorafgaand aan de verkiezingen. Ook met Maurice de Hond, ook met iedereen. Er was ineens Geert Wilders, je kon erop stemmen. Groot gemaakt en de verkiezingen waren er niet voorbij. En Geert Wilders is kalt gesteld en iedereen begrijpt het. En daarmee hebben ze heel rechts afgetroefd. Dat is het hele spelletje. Het is zo duidelijk, het spel. Ja, en hij...
Ja.
Het spel is inderdaad heel erg duidelijk. Ja. So, there's a game being played here, right? We have 4 political parties, and one political party wants an exit and wants out of the EU, out of the euro, and stuff like that. And the other 3 parties don't want that. And one of those 3 parties, Pieter Omtzigt, left the negotiating table, even though before there were elections, Omtzigt was rather, clear on not ruling with Wilders, right? So, maybe we need new elections. Who knows? But all these people in politics, aside from Thierry and the FVD, all of them are WEF puppets. Or used to be a WEF puppet like Omtzigt, which now has an own political party, right? The NSA. New social contract. Where have we read that one before, right? New social contract. We're going to take a look at an article of the World Economic Forum. Yeah, the shadowy organizations that no one votes upon. Right? New Social Contract is the name of the political party of Omtzigt. Right? Now, we're going to take a look at an article from the World Economic Forum. Why we need a new social contract for the 21st century. There you go. So you have a new political party named New Social Contract, and the World Economic Forum talks about a new social contract. Yep. So, Omtzigt is also a WEF puppet, basically, using the terminology that the World Economic Forum uses, It's like, oh my God, man. Why don't people see this? Waarom zien mensen dit niet? De WEF, ja, die heeft een heel artikel over een nieuw sociaal contract. Nou, Pieter Omtzigt, die zat bij de CDA. En het CDA, ja, die hebben ook mensen die daar naartoe gaan, naar de World Economic Forum. En zoiets allemaal. Dus het is toch gewoon overduidelijk. Right? It's clear. It's obvious. It's obviously clear that, Omtzigt is not working for the people, right? What is amazing? So the executive producer is saying, talk about something else. We've heard enough about the World Economic Forum. So we're going to take a look at what's happening in the Middle East, of course, because that's also very important. Oh, and there's also something else. We are live on Twitch. Yep, here you go. Here's the Twitch channel because Facebook is down. And this is our backup channel. So we're going to take a look at the Middle East. Al Jazeera, whilst the executive producer shows her face. Here she is. Nice? Yeah. So we're going to take a look at Al Jazeera. Oh, our buddy Will Turbot is also live. Fake Mike Real News, talking about Facebook and Instagram down. But why? Why are they down? So let's take a look at some videos of what's happening in Gaza, right? Very, very sad thing to see. We saw the flower massacre and stuff like that. And we're going to take a look at this here.
Smoke and explosions on the horizon in North Gaza after Israel bombarded the area. It's still unclear if there are any casualties. The attack follows a night of relentless bombardment on residential areas in Jabalia and Beit Lahia. Several Palestinians were killed in the offensive. A search operation is underway for survivors. In Gaza City, people were seen queuing at the Kuwait roundabout, seeking humanitarian aid, only to be met with gunfire. Witnesses say Israeli vehicles nearby opened fire on 3 trucks carrying flour, water, and other supplies.
They speak about the aid every day. They're deceiving us. 3 or 4 trucks of aid for thousands of people. My son told me that he's hungry and he couldn't wait anymore. My children get up hungry every morning and I've nothing to offer them. This isn't life.
The humanitarian crisis in Gaza is worsening as malnourished people, including children, are struggling to survive. Doctors say these children are dying from a variety of diseases because of the food shortage. The trickle of humanitarian aid being dropped by various air forces is not enough to feed almost 2.5 million people. Human rights advocates say Israel's forced starvation of Palestinians is a war crime.
People are in Gaza facing incessant bombardment. They're being starved. They lack access to basic resources. They have been displaced multiple times over. For most of them, their homes, their hospitals, their community institutions, their schools have been damaged or destroyed, and they're left every day just trying to survive. And the idea that people are being killed as they scavenge for meager rations of food is just appalling.
There are 1 million cases of infectious diseases reported by the Gaza Health Ministry, with few facilities left to treat the sick. The systematic shelling of Gaza's hospitals by Israel has crippled the health system. The UN is renewing calls for a ceasefire to save the many in constant danger. Axel Zaimovic, Al Jazeera.
This is what's happening in Gaza, in the Middle East. Very, very sad thing to see, because these are people we're talking about, right? People being shot at when they get humanitarian help. Very, very sad thing to see what's happening in the Middle East. I'm not just a spectator, I'm speaking out. This must not happen. Enough wars, right? We have the Ukraine war, we have the Israel war, we have the war in Sudan going on, we have the Congo destabilized, enough wars. What kind of planet is this? Huh? Children are starving because they get no food. De kinderen gaan dood omdat ze geen eten meer krijgen. Ze worden gewoon beschoten als er humanitaire hulp komt. Very, very sad thing to see what's happening in the Middle East. And today is Super Tuesday in the US. And that means we have Nikki Haley versus Donald Trump in some awkward state. And, we're going to take a look at this here. Al Jazeera is against Trump, so they're highlighting Nikki Haley. Let's see what she has to do in her campaign.
In polling places across the U.S., Super Tuesday is the great decider. The biggest date on the presidential primary calendar, with 15 states awarding a third of all delegates, often clears a path to the White House. Super Tuesday has sealed the party's nomination for Democrats Bill Clinton, Al Gore,
I will fight for you,
and John Kerry. And it's made standard bearers of Republicans George H.W. Bush and his son, George W. Bush.
I've had a proud record of working with both Republicans and Democrats, which is what our nation needs.
This time, the results are expected to help President Joe Biden emerge as the Democrats' presumptive nominee, and former President Donald Trump to surge ahead with an unsurmountable lead for the Republicans. For the losers, the polling booths of Super Tuesday states are often where hope goes to die.
Like a Waterloo for losing candidates. If you don't do well on Super Tuesday in both parties' processes, you have a really steep hill to climb.
Despite what she said,
I'm not giving up this fight.
For Republican Nikki Haley, analysts say a big loss on Super Tuesday could mark the end of the trail. Some voters say they're focusing on personalities.
I'm voting. She is not a real Republican, right? That's the mask she's wearing, right? Oh, I'm a Republican. Yeah, but all the constituents, the people who vote for you, Nikki Haley, are Democrats. We know the game. We know the game.
For anyone whose name isn't Donald Trump. Why? Because I believe in humanism, fairness, compassion. None of those traits I believe he possesses.
Now, wait a minute. We have Joe Biden, right, who left Afghanistan to the will of the Taliban, right, and, waging war in Ukraine, supporting Ukraine by taking over the Donbass, right, which basically are autonomous states within Ukraine, right? And there's so much more, and what has Donald Trump done, basically? He's also done bad things, right? We will never, ever forgive Donald Trump for giving the Golden Heights to Israel, or attacking Soleimani, right? The Iranian general that Iran still has not forgotten about. We will never forget. Those are the mistakes you've made, Trump. I'm really reconsidering about Trump. It's like you have one bad person, a very, very bad, corrupt person, right? Joe Biden, who's forgetting everything, who's pooping his pants and tripping over wires and stuff, can't even walk upstairs, right? And you have Donald Trump, who says, "Make America great again," even though, I haven't seen that in the 4 years of his rule, right? They're all puppets. It's the power structure that still stays, right? Not that person in the White House. It's the whole power structure. The same goes for Dutch politics. Er is een politieke structuur, dat eenmaal gemaakt is. Ja, en dat politieke structuur, daar zitten al die politici in. En hun maakt het niet uit of het land nou helemaal in vuur en vlam is en zo is. Hun maakt er geen zak uit. Ja, want zij zitten in het beschermende bel. Zij krijgen een baan als zij de politiek uitgaan en zoiets. Ja, als ze de politiek uitgaan, dan kunnen ze net zo goed weer erin treden. Ja, mij lukt het niet. So, it's one big club and you and I are not in it, right? So Donald Trump has done good things and bad things, but we weigh the bad more because, it has consequences.
Others on issues.
I think there's a lot of our infrastructure that needs to be dealt with. We need to spend money at home as well. But I think if Ukraine falls, then Russia is in a very good position to come against us.
Failing a historic surprise, the odds favor a familiar face-off.
If Ukraine falls, then America does not have a satellite state within the belly of Russia, right? It's as easy as that. It's a satellite state. You guys have been in Ukraine ever since its independence. We got video of George H.W. Bush, right, Senior Bush, speaking in the Rada in 1991 in Kiev. So we're also going to show that after this.
Despite the all but inevitable prospect of a do-over with the same candidates from 4 years ago, polls show voters have a big problem with that.
Large percentage of Americans who say that they do not want a Trump-Biden rematch. I mean, it's 65%, which, as you know, these days you can't get 65% of the American public to agree that the sky is blue.
This year, the race comes with a wild card. With Trump facing 91 charges in 4 trials, it is possible, just possible, that Trump could finish his campaign as a convicted criminal after the biggest day of primary voting has cemented his place as the Republican Party's presumptive nominee. John Hendren, Al Jazeera, Raleigh, North Carolina.
Now, this is the game of Democrats versus Republicans, right? If you outweigh the things that Trump has done, it's not really much. You know, he's attacked Syria after the Skripal incident, right? No mass casualties there. You know, he basically attacked the Iranian general and also an Iraqi general. You know, there were casualties there, which is not allowed, right? He did that under executive order. You know, the president is like, I'm going to sign it, and now, okay, you got clearance to do this. Soleimani was attacking the proxies that were attacking Syria, right? Syria invited Iran to protect Syria against the proxies that we supported. So it's basically, you know, it's a whole hornet's nest of all these small groups fighting each other. You know, we have a NATO ally, Turkey, invading northeast of Syria and the north of Iraq, you know, because of the Kurds. And the Americans support the Kurds in northeast of Syria, right? So that's something to think about. We're going to show George Bush in Ukraine, 1991. Here we have George Bush Sr., the CIA asset, basically, in the Ukrainian parliament.
Overshadowed by a vast government apparatus, cramped by forces that attempted to control every aspect of their lives. And today, your people probe the promise of freedom in cities and republics, on farms, in businesses, around university campuses. You debate the fundamental question of liberty, self-rule, and free enterprise. Americans, you see, have a deep commitment to these values.
Now, we're going to repeat what has been said here.
Your people probe the promise of freedom in cities and republics, on farms, in businesses, around university campuses. You debate the fundamental question of liberty, self-rule, and free enterprise.
Liberty, self-rule, and free enterprise. Now let's take a look at, you know, the so-called self-rule of Ukraine. Let's look up Victoria Nuland, who says, fuck the EU.
When you're a high-ranking official talking about diplomatic efforts in Ukraine, the last thing you want to do is drop your guard.
So that would be great, I think, to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it. And, you know, the EU.
But that is exactly what reportedly happened between US Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland and US Ambassador to Ukraine Jeffrey Pyatt. The exchange has since surfaced online, including the crude swipe at the European Union.
So you have someone from the State Department in the US and an ambassador in Ukraine deciding who's going to be in power in Kiev. Now, what did George Bush Sr. say? Self-rule? Really? Self-rule?
The audio clip of a woman and man, said to be Newland and Pyatt, here's them discussing strategies to work with the three main opposition figures.
I don't think Cleach should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea.
In terms of him not going into the government, just let him sort of stay out and do his political homework and stuff. I'm just thinking in terms of sort of the process moving ahead, we want to keep the moderate Democrats together. The problem is going to be Tony Book and his guys. And, you know, I'm sure that's part of what Yanukovych is calculating on all of this.
I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, you know, what he needs is Cleach and Tony Book on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week.
You see, these people have an anti-Russian view, right? Everything Russian is bad. Whoa, bad, Russia bad, Russia bad, right? These people are monsters. They are deciding the fate of Ukraine. And we have Zelensky as a puppet. You know, we showed it in the animation, you know, pushing that button. More war, more war, more war, more war, more deaths, more. It's all because of the State Department, right? So we have that going on, and if we look at the elections, it's probably going to be Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, even though Joe Biden bragged about firing a prosecutor in Ukraine, talk about self-rule, huh? That was researching a gas company, Burisma Holdings, where the son of Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, became the CEO of that company. So we're going to take a look at this here.
I remember going over convincing our team, or others too, convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, what, 6 hours? I looked at it, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
Someone who was solid. Yeah, someone who did not watch what the Bidens were doing, right? Ja, Barry Hamilton, we zijn inderdaad op Twitch. Facebook heeft problemen en zoiets. Dus ja, dan gaan we maar live op Twitch. Ja, mensen. So this is all happening, right? The so-called self-rule in Ukraine. You know, it really is amazing. So, yeah, there you have it. He fired a prosecutor in Ukraine. It's really, really amazing. So let's take a look at Al Jazeera again. and see what else they have to show us. South Asian fighters in Ukraine. Yeah, there are even South American fighters in Ukraine. We have Colombia joining Ukraine. We have other countries joining Ukraine. This is a world war. And people have to understand this. It's a world war. Every country is involved, right? We have even war in Sudan, where you have Wagner troops, right? Russian mercenaries protecting gold mines, and you have Ukrainians fighting Wagner troops in Sudan, right? We cover this. You know, it may sound very, 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 very weird, but we cover this. Sudan War Explained. Let's see if we can give some context here. So let's take a look at this here.
So that brings us
If we rewind.
about what's happening in Sudan.
Rival forces remain locked in a power struggle despite international calls for a ceasefire.
It's an all-out battle for control of the country between Sudan's army and a paramilitary unit known as the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, led by men who used to be allies. Hundreds of people have been killed, and hundreds have been injured. There's fighting in different parts of Sudan, but it's heaviest in the capital, Khartoum. There have been attempts at a ceasefire, but they haven't lasted. There have been air attacks and shelling. The airport has been severely damaged. There's no running water or electricity. Supplies of food are running low.
This ridiculous battle that has civilians caught in the middle. And we have nothing to do with this.
So what's behind the fighting? Well, people in Sudan have been struggling to set up a democracy after decades under one-man rule. Omar al-Bashir came to power in a military coup in the late 1980s, became president, and stayed for 30 years, until people rose up and demanded that he step down. Then the army took over, and people didn't want them in charge either. So after pressure from protesters, the army agreed to share power with different political groups in a transitional government. The idea was that it would oversee a transition to a democratic system. But 2 years later, the army kicked out the prime minister and seized power again.
The people in Sudan seem to be trapped in this limbo, and they're going round and round in a circle that involves the same people, with no clear path or trajectory on how they can actually start to plan for transitioning.
There have been ongoing talks to make that transition happen between the military and political groups representing that pro-democracy movement. But a major reason the process is being held up is because of an underlying rivalry between the army and the Rapid Support Forces that have become like a second army. And many people see this as a personal rivalry between the army's leader, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, who's effectively the leader of the country, and the leader of the RSF, General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, widely known as Hemeti.
So we have another animation of the Sudan War, right, which we're going to show. There we go. Why Sudan's civil war is worse than you think. So these are all the ethnic groups within Sudan, right? Many groups and stuff. So we're going to take a look at this here.
as well. It was home to nearly 600 distinctly different ethnic groups in more than 400 different languages. Though Arabic was the more common lingua franca in the north, and English was the more common lingua franca in the south, owing to the colonial period. Sudan's northeast, based around the upper reaches of the Nile River and the country's coastline on the Red Sea, was predominantly Arab and Muslim, while the peripheral regions of the country to the west in Darfur and to the south in southern Sudan were substantially more diverse. Darfur was overwhelmingly Muslim, but largely populated by various sub-Saharan African tribal groups who were largely settled farmers, along with smaller numbers of nomadic Arab-identifying herders in the north. And on the other hand, southern Sudan was populated by hundreds of different sub-Saharan African ethnic groups who were largely not Muslim at all, and who followed either various traditional African animist faiths or Christianity. Because of these sharp internal divisions, tensions bubbled up to the surface in Sudan between the Arab-Muslim-dominated north and the ethnically and religiously distinct peripheral regions. And the country's first civil war between the north and the south began in 1955, the year before independence was even granted. That first civil war was devastating, and it would last for the next 16 years until 1972. Around 1 million people were killed across Sudan during the war, and it ended with the north agreeing to grant the southern half of the country its political autonomy, with the establishment of the Southern Sudan Autonomous Region. However, only a decade later in 1983, under the rule of the Arab military dictator Ghaffar Mohammedan Nimyeri, Khartoum would revoke the South's hard-fought autonomous status and introduce strict Islamic Sharia law for the entire country, including within the non-Muslim, non-Arab, formerly autonomous South. This ended up leading to the southern half of Sudan rebelling against the government again, which led to the Second Sudanese Civil War that will last for another 22 agonizing years until 2005.
The whole country has known war since its inception of the country, right? So let's take a look at this here. The Darfur genocide, we will not ever forget that. That was very, very sad thing to see in Sudan, we have other animations of troops in Sudan. Here we go.
Genocide in Darfur in the early 2000s, the RSF have begun committing similar atrocities in Darfur today, after several Darfuri rebel factions announced their support for the SAF and Al-Burhan. Multiple large-scale massacres of Africans by RSF forces in Darfur have been reported, which has led the United States to publicly accuse the RSF of war crimes and ethnic cleansing. But the United States has also accused the SAF of committing war crimes during the conflict too. Faced with the more experienced fighters in the RSF, the SAF has resorted to their superior air power to bomb RSF positions from the sky, and they frequently carried out indiscriminate airstrikes of civilian populated areas in the name of attacking the RSF and their supply lines. And the RSF has been continuing to swell their numbers because they're attracting large numbers of volunteers from thousands of miles away. When you look in northern Africa through the lens of ethnicity, you will see a nearly continuous belt of Arab-identifying tribes that extends westward from Sudan and Darfur, through Chad and Niger, and then into Mali and Mauritania. Hamedi, as a member of one of these Arab-identifying tribes himself, has made strategic alliances and overtures to many of these other tribes spanning all the way to the Atlantic. And thousands of men from these regions have flocked to join the RSF in his active fights in Sudan and in Darfur. Many of them are coming for loot and plunder, as cars and other valuable goods are stolen in Sudan during their raids and then transported westward across the Sahel and resold to unsuspecting buyers in so-called Dagalo markets, named after Hamdan Dagalo himself. And unlike the Janjaweed of the past, who largely carried out their atrocities in Darfur with horses and AK-47s, the RSF of today are acquiring very heavy advanced weapons to help them in their war this time around, like anti-tank weapons, surface-to-air missiles, machine guns, and grenade launchers because of all the different proxy wars that are taking place in Sudan, atop of the war between the RSF and the SAF. First and foremost is the struggle for supremacy in Sudan that is ongoing between the rival royal families of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Both are major investors in the Sudanese economy, with substantial assets they stand to lose if the side they don't want to win comes out on top. The Emirates have already invested more than $13 billion into the country, while the Saudis announced in 2022, before the war began, that they would invest up to $24 billion into the country as well. Sudan is, after all, a very valuable piece on the board in the United Arab Emirates' grander geopolitical objectives around the Red Sea. Abu Dhabi and Riyadh are each actively competing against the other to become the leading Arab and Persian Gulf state. Though the UAE only has a fourth of Saudi Arabia's population, the Emirates have an economy that punches far above their weight that's about half the size of the Saudis. And the two are the leading economic powers in the Arab world. The Saudis dominate the eastern shore of the Red Sea with their own shoreline, one of the most critical shipping routes in the world, with the Suez Canal to the north and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait to the south. The UAE has therefore spent years attempting to build up their position and influence around the Red Sea's shores, to challenge Saudi hegemony in the area, by backing the secessionist Southern Transitional Council in Yemen against the Saudi-backed government and Iranian-backed Houthis, and by building up military bases on the Yemeni islands of Socotra and Perim, by investing hundreds of millions of dollars into developing the port of Berbera nearby to the Red Sea in the breakaway state of Somaliland, by supporting the government of Abiy Ahmed in Ethiopia, and by cultivating ties to the RSF and Hemeti in Sudan, whose fighters the UAE used in Yemen and fought alongside of in Libya before the war in Sudan even began. The UAE then quickly chose to back Hemeti and the RSF in Sudan once the war began, hoping that an outright RSF victory in the country would cement their growing geopolitical influence and clout in the Red Sea region at the expense of the Saudis. And although Abu Dhabi denies it, there is credible evidence that the UAE has been supplying the RSF with massive quantities of weapons. A report from the Wall Street Journal showed several dozen armed deliveries that the UAE made to the RSF after the war began through the airport of Amjaras just across the border in Chad, while the UAE is further giving the RSF access to their banks and financial system so they can skirt around US sanctions in exchange for Emirati access to the RSF's controlled gold mines and oil fields in Sudan. Khalifa Haftar, the warlord who rules the eastern half of Libya, that the UAE and the RSF both supported for years during the Libyan civil war, has also apparently decided on returning the favor by opening up the stockpiles of the previous Gaddafi regime in Libya to the RSF. That has included anti-tank weapons in addition to convoys carrying Libyan oil to power the RSF's vehicles. And in addition to the military support they're receiving from the UAE and from Haftar's Libya, and from thousands of volunteers who are coming from all across the Sahel, Hemeti and the RSF are also receiving significant military support from Russia's paramilitary Wagner Group as well. The Wagner Group has been known to have had a presence within Sudan since at least 2017, as a mercenary group for hire. Wagner soldiers were contracted in Sudan to guard valuable gold mines in the unstable Darfur region, and they brought in Russian weaponry in exchange for Sudanese gold. The Wagner Group fought in Libya for the Haftar regime in the east alongside the RSF and the UAE. And after Russia's invasion of Ukraine began in February of 2022, Wagner's operations in Sudan became even more critical to the Russian government. Sudan is the world's 10th largest producer of gold, with extensive gold mines found all across the country, but particularly in Darfur, that was under the influence of the RSF. Perhaps anticipating their future increased needs for Sudanese gold, Hemeti himself was in Moscow the very day the Russians invaded Ukraine, signing paperwork. After the United States and the European Union and other Western countries severed the Russians from their financial systems following the invasion, the Russians began having to turn to more alternative and covert methods of funding their army in Ukraine, like by securing more untraceable gold from places like Sudan.
There you go. And there are also Ukrainian forces fighting Wagner, as we just said, right? So this is all going on. This is all going on. And I do not want any more war, right? So how can you stop this? It's a very complex situation. And, there's no easy answer, right? There's no easy answer for this problem that we have. So if we look at the map, you'll see that, everything is interconnected basically. And when one country fails, other countries fail, right? So here we have Sudan, and in Khartoum we have the RSF against the other army, the SAF. So yeah, that's all going on. And there's still heavy fighting in Sudan. There's still heavy fighting in Israel. There's still heavy fighting in Ukraine. So war everywhere, man, everywhere. And Libya is still, a broken country, basically. And Ethiopia is on a war path because they need a port. They had this under-table deal with Somaliland, but Somalia says, nope, we don't want that. We still have the Venezuela-Guyana thing going on, right? Venezuela had a referendum about annexing Guyana, and, there are forces going to Guyana, defending Guyana, basically, and who knows if Venezuela will ever invade that part of Guyana. So there's so much going on. Ecuador is trying to clean up their streets, right? The gangs over there in Ecuador have a lot of power, and it's basically the state versus the gangs, and the civilians are trapped in between. So we have that going on in Ecuador. Last time we looked at Peru, we had the president of Peru who wanted to freeze cabinet, and the cabinet said, nope, we're not going to do that. We're going to freeze you. You get house arrest. So now you have the vice president enacting as a president, and large demonstrations last time we looked. This was last year. So who knows what's happening in Peru. We also have Brazil, which Lula is basically a dictator. Many journalists go to the US and other free states because Brazil is a hellhole now that Lula has taken over power. We have that interview from Tucker Carlson talking to the son of Bolsonaro, the last president. And we're going to take a look at some images of that. Here we go.
Help.
So, just to get specific about what's happened and when. So, it was the very last day. I think your father's term ended on New Year's Eve, 2022. I think that's right. December 31st. January 8th, you had your own January 6th.
Yes. This is that excuse that they use to go after every conservative.
So, almost a year to the day later, the United States government was involved in it as well, the Biden administration. You had a supposed attempted coup on the democratically elected government of Brazil, the Lula government, and conveniently a bunch of Lula's political opponents wound up in jail. Mm-hmm. Is that a fair summary?
Yes.
Is that what happened?
Yes. And the funny thing, Tucker, is that they say that it was an attempt of a coup, but in January, in a Sunday, no weapons were arrested. There was no support from police or armed forces. So, in fact, it was a protest that went far away. I do not agree to people breaking the doors of the Congress or the Supreme Court, whatever. But these people now is getting punishments of 17 years in jail. If you commit
17 years for
17
protesting. And can I just say, it's pretty clear that your election was stolen by the Lula government. I think that's fair to say. From the outside, it looked stolen.
Yes. I have my opinion. This is a very sensitive issue.
No,
that
I know
have
it is.
to I have to take care about my words, but what I can tell you is...
Why would you have to take care of your words?
You have a congressman that is in jail now because he made a video, Tucker. He made a video talking bad words for the Supreme Court. This man, a congressman, is in jail for 9 years. His name is Daniel Silveira.
Wait. He's in jail for criticizing the Supreme Court?
Yes. Not only criticized, he said bad words. That's true. I would never do a video like that, but imagine, I don't know.
Bad words. Did he threaten violence?
Some, how can I say that? Talking shit things to the ministers.
Yes.
Your mother is this and that, you know, things
You're allowed
like
to talk shit to people in power in a free country, aren't you?
Yes. Where you have the First Amendment respected, yes. But in Brazil, we have some articles inside of the Constitution that guarantee for senators and congressmen like me that you not receive any kind of punishment about what you speak. It's say like we have freedom of speech in Brazil, at least in the Constitution, and the congressman is one step ahead because we cannot receive punishment about our words, votes, or whatever.
You basically have immunity on what you can say, right? This is how politics works. You know, they're supposed to have immunity. They can say anything. But not in Brazil. Nope, not in Brazil anymore. So this is all happening, people. And, you know, it's getting from bad to worse, right? And we're just spectators. But we are speaking out. We are speaking out. And that is the most important thing you can do, is speak out about what's happening. You know, have some empathy. So we're going to take a look at George Galloway. We covered this yesterday and the day before yesterday about his win in the by-election in Rockdale. And, you know, we love George Galloway.
So that's what I'm predicting here. The next election will be about Muslims and will be about the taking away of civil liberties in this country.
Hello everyone, welcome back to My Left Eye. George Galloway has been sworn into Parliament after last Thursday's by-election victory in Rochdale. Following the ceremony, he gave a speech to the press where he called out Prime Minister Rishi Sunak for trying to race-bait voters with anti-Muslim language, something Galloway believes will be one of the main tactics that the Tories will use in the upcoming general election. He also made an appeal to Jeremy Corbyn to form a socialist alliance in an interview with Crispin from Not the Andrew Marr Show's YouTube channel, calling for independents and grassroots parties to take on both the Tories and Labour in the ballot box later this year. Let's see what's happening.
Order, order. Will members wishing to take their seats please come to the table?
You have to bow your head 3 times, really? What kind of ceremony is that?
I swear by Almighty God that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles, his heirs and successors, according to law. So help me God.
And then he signs a book. You know, it's really amazing. Really, really is amazing. We love George Galloway, and you're welcome in the House of Commons. Right?
Center of that wedge issue that he intends to use as perhaps his only hope of re-election. It's quite clear that there's going to be a raft of measures that will take away still further freedoms from the British people. Freedom to speak, freedom to assemble, freedom to protest and to demonstrate. And if they had their way, freedom to elect people that the establishment doesn't like. That was also the meaning of his rather embarrassing, impromptu performance outside number 10. And what do I mean by a wedge issue? They want to force Starmer either to stand up and defend the democratic rights of the British people, including the rights of its religious and ethnic minorities. And if he does that, I'm a Dutchman. Or...
Is that an insult, George? You know, what's wrong with being a Dutchman?
To engage him in what will turn out to be a Dutch auction of nastiness.
Dutch auction.
If he chooses, as I suspect he will, the latter, that's going to allow us and independent candidates to pick up potentially millions of votes from those who treasure the free rights.
The way I see it, right, we also have English viewers from the UK. The way I see it, there's a power vacuum, right? And the conservatives that are in power in 10 Downing, they don't have the trust of the people anymore. If you look at Rockdale, there was this guy, I already forgot his name, but you know, he's a repairman basically who has a store in Rockdale, and he wanted to run for politics. He was second to George Galloway. So for all those English people watching, you know, when there is an election, put yourself on the ballot, right? If you want to change, you can change. We see it in Rockdale that all the establishment parties are being left, you know, they're put on the side. We look at the independents and the people that we trust, such as George Galloway, right? So basically there is a power vacuum in the UK, even though there are parties in power. The vacuum comes from the public who does not trust the people in politics anymore. You guys had a referendum about leaving the EU. Well, you're a half foot in the EU. You know, you didn't leave the EU totally, right? So this is what's happening. The Brexit has been stalled that long because there were people within politics that did not want to leave the EU. You know? So when there is an election in Britain, put yourself on the ballot and you may find out you get a lot of votes. We're going to search for the guy's name by elections. Rockdale. Yeah, Rishi Sunak is like, oh my God, George Galloway won. Oh my God, oh my God. Oh. You know, it's really amazing, really is amazing. Let's see if we can find an article about the Rockdale by-election. You guys can also watch, right? Maybe we need to define it in another way. Let's see if we can find it here. George Galloway won the Rockdale election by a pro-Palestinian ticket after Labour abandoned its candidate over inflammatory comments he made about Israel. Let's see if we can... by-election, Rockdale candidates. There we go. What do we have here? Sir Tony Lloyd, who died in January. This is why the elections were held. Let's see if we can find it here. I believe his name is David Tully. Yeah, David Tully. David Tully is a vehicle repair shop owner from Rockdale. You see, he's not involved in politics. He's not even involved in politics. And he was second, right? So people in England, put yourself on the ballot. You may win a lot of votes, you know. So, yeah. Then you can change the course of history. Then you can make England great again. Because England was a great country. And now it's all broken up. Big brother state, this and that, you know, more Muslims than English people and stuff like that, you know. Demographics has changed a lot in England in the last 10 to 20 years. But you guys can make England great again. I know you can. Right? So, glory for England. You know. Let's see what Chris says here. RFK believes in the climate hoax. Yeah, a lot of people believe in the climate hoax, right? First they said the earth is cooling. In the 1970s, they said the earth is cooling. And then they talked about global warming. Remember that? The world is getting hotter and this and that. And then suddenly it's climate change. Oh, the climate is changing. You know, it's Orwellian, right? Every generation grows up thinking that the world's going to end. The world's going to live on. You are going to end. When is just a question, right? We're here temporarily. And, yeah, people need to realize that. Ben je hier zo live en dan praat je alleen maar Engels. Ja. Maar goed, we zijn er tijdelijk. En mensen moeten dat beseffen. Dat we er maar tijdelijk zijn. Dus oorlog en zulke dingen. Ja, het is erg dat het gebeurt. Ook belangrijk dat we weten wat er gaande is. Maar hiervoor ben je niet in het leven gekomen. You are not born to wage war on other people. You are born to be free. To be free. Free from the state. Free from the banks. Free from the chains that, you know, bind us. You are supposed to be free. I am supposed to be free. But I am not free. I am within a system which I disapprove of. Right? I don't know about you guys, but we zijn vrij. We zijn vrij geboren. Maar ja, ben je wel zo vrij? Ben je wel zo vrij? Die gaan maar zijn rekening even niet betalen. Ja, en dan kom je wel achter of je vrij bent of niet. So if you don't pay the bill, you'll find out if you're free or not. Right? We are not free. Overall, you know, you can say, I can do this, I can do that, I'm free. But no, we're not free. We're not free. We are told we are free, whilst we're not free. Money is made out of nothing, right? And people work their butts off for a bit of money, whilst banks create money out of thin air. Thin air, right? You may say I'm a conspiracy theorist, but let's take a look at money creation by central bank. There. Let's take a look at a clip about how money is created, right? How is money created? Everything you need to know.
This episode is a more detailed follow-up to my 2017 video, Who Controls All of Our Money? I'm going to focus on the United States in this video only because they're the world reserve currency, but everything in this video affects all of us because the central banks around the world are all doing the same thing. With that being said, let's begin. Around the world today, we see central banks printing money. So here's a question. We're told from a young age that money is hard to come by. We should study to work our whole life to earn it. How then can all this money suddenly come from nowhere? How is money created? Who's going to pay it back? What exactly does all of this mean? And what's going to happen next? In this episode, we'll explore the 3 ways that money is being created and some of the consequences that are going to happen. I'm also going to show you the true origins of wealth inequality. If you watch this episode the whole way through, you should have a well-rounded idea of what's going on today. It's important for people to know. I'm really just trying to help with that. This journey starts off simple enough, but by the end, you'll start to see the insanity of what we're dealing with.
You are watching Cold Fusion TV.
The first form of money is the one created by government. In practice, it's outsourced to the central bank Royal Mint, but controlled by the government. Physical money comes in 2 forms, either paper money or coins. This physical money is a tiny fraction of the economy, and in many economies, this kind of money only makes up about 3 to 8%. This physical money is created in order to meet the obligations of private banks. When you go to an ATM and try to withdraw cash, banks need to make sure that they have enough cash in order to meet those obligations. So let's take a $10 note for example. It costs approximately 3 cents in order to print this note. This means that there's approximately $9.97 of profit for creating a $10 note. This $9.97 can now be added to tax revenue of the government. This revenue is called seigniorage. So since the government makes profit from printing and minting coins and can reduce the amount of taxation on the public, you might be thinking, why don't governments just always print physical money? The main reason that governments don't create the majority of money is because of politicians. If the politician running the office could create money at will, there would be a massive conflict of interest. There would be an urge to keep printing to fulfill campaign promises or fund wars. This would, in theory, destroy the currency by excessive printing, causing massive devaluation. The more money you have in circulation, the less it's worth. And that's a key point. For example, if massive inflation takes place and the average Joe has $1 million, but that $1 million only buys an apple, how much is $1 million actually worth? The loss in purchasing power of money over time is called inflation, and when inflation gets out of hand, money becomes worthless. Some recent examples of runaway inflation include Argentina, Zimbabwe, and Venezuela. In this animation, you can graphically see just how fast inflation can run away. You don't see it coming, and as the inflation rate goes up, people quickly lose faith in the currency. For example, here we can see some people in Venezuela using money to make handbags and to draw pictures on because it simply isn't worth anything anymore. You can think of money as a measuring stick of value, a measuring stick that is highly elastic and can change depending on how much of it there is. For thousands of years, gold was the measuring stick of value. Gold was kind of like a physical anchor, keeping the money supply in check and governments responsible.
Not only gold, right? You also had silver and bronze.
In 1971, President Richard Nixon announced that the United States would no longer convert dollars to gold at a fixed value. Since that point, money, the measuring stick of value, has become elastic. Since the US dollar backs all other currencies as a reserve currency, Nixon's decision changed the world. In all of this, you might still notice that despite politicians supposedly not being able to influence money creation, it's happening anyway. This may cause problems, as we'll see later in the episode. So to recap, the government creates physical forms of money, like notes and coins. Only about 3 to 8% of money is made this way. Signage is the income from that physical money. This income is both a benefit to the government and the taxpayer. It reduces debt for the government and reduces the burden on the individual taxpayer. The reason governments don't create more of this money is because of the inflation risk from politicians' decisions. Let's move on to number 2.
So this is a very interesting chapter. Private banks and debt-based money, right? We're not going to go all in. We have done episodes about the money creation and stuff like that. So, you know, there's so much to tell, so much corruption to show. But we are at the end of the show. So we're going to take a look at our friend Ollie the Octopus, right? Who's going to close off with his famous song, "You're Paying Attention Now, Aren't You?" There you go.
This is the scene over South London. I'm here in Fulham. It's the 10th.
I know you're watching, Charlie. Maybe not right now, but you always watch RHTVLive, as I'm told. And I thank you again for letting me play your clip.
In the streets of London, the peace has been disturbed. Fires burning everywhere, the language of the unheard. There's a generation thwarted with no ownership and pride, and fat cats with bellies as wide as the rich and poor divide. A broken social contract, bottom up austerity. Oh, we can condemn it, but we're paying attention now, aren't we? Blame it on the hoodies, blame it on the feral youth. But remember, you were young once and you cared about the truth. We sold out to the free market, made a couple of billionaires, and all we got was this mess and McDonald's everywhere. Keep unemployment high, keeps the cost of labor low, keeps young men out on the streets, and well, what do you know? Down to Dixon's, you can take some stuff for free. You can get an Apple Mac and a high-def TV. But if you work in Canary Wharf in a bank too big to fail, There's much better looting going on, and you don't have to go to jail. Steal from a generation for the pockets of a few, but it can only go so far, and you're paying attention now, aren't you? Of London, the peace has been disturbed. Fires burning everywhere, the language of the unheard. There's a generation thwarted with no ownership and pride, and fat cats with bellies as wide as the rich and poor divide. A broken social contract, bottom up austerity. Oh, we can condemn it, but we're paying attention now, aren't we? Blame it on the hoodies, blame it on the feral youth. But remember, you were young once and you cared about the truth. We sold out to the free market, made a couple of billionaires, and all we got was this mess and McDonald's everywhere. Keep unemployment high, keeps the cost of labour low, keeps young men out on the streets, and well, what do you know? Down to Dixon's, you can take some stuff for free. You can get an Apple Mac and a high-def TV. But if you work in Canary Wharf in a bank too big to fail, there's much better looting going on, and you don't have to go to jail. Steal from a generation for the pockets of a few, but it can only go so far, and you're paying attention now, aren't you?
Are we paying attention? Are we paying attention? Let's put a cherry on the top, right? And let's take a look at Haiti. What's going on there? Haitian gangs tried to seize airport days after prison break. Let's take a look at this. This was 3 hours ago.
The international airport has stopped operating. No flights in or out. Paralyzed by gang violence, like much of the country. A gang leader and former police officer, Jimmy Cherizet, nicknamed Barbecue, has claimed responsibility for the attacks, saying the aim is to force the Prime Minister, Ariel Henry, to stand down. In an unusual move, the gangs are uniting to bring down the government, and analysts say this could be a turning point in Haiti's already tumultuous history.
The government gave us the weapons to fight with our brothers and sisters. Now we turn the guns against them to fight them because they don't do anything for us.
Gangs have overrun two of the main prisons in the capital, releasing several thousand prisoners, including gang leaders. Gun battles are taking place in the streets.
Prisoners have escaped from several jails. It's miserable. The crisis is getting worse. Everywhere is unsafe. I can't find clients for my taxi to make money to feed my children. I'm an old man.
Nothing seems to be functioning here anymore. Thousands of people are fleeing their homes. Many are having to queue up to get clean water. Some tell Al Jazeera they haven't been able to find drinking water since Sunday.
We feel discouraged. We're fleeing. Our children can't go to school. We can't buy food. How can we live in such a situation? We're fighting our fellow Haitians while we're the same Haitian people.
The US administration has urged Americans to leave the country as soon as possible. Canada has closed its embassy, and some aid organizations have suspended their operations due to the dangerous situation.
Thank you very much.
The Prime Minister flew to Kenya last week to finalize a deal to set up a UN task force led by Kenya to help restore order. That triggered this latest crisis. But there are still no UN troops on the ground to help authorities restore order, and the Prime Minister has yet to return. Stephanie Decker, Al Jazeera.
There is not a coup going on in Haiti. You see, the president of Haiti was assassinated in 2019, and after that, there was a power vacuum, right? And the power vacuum ensured all these gangs getting their guns and stuff and fighting each other at first. But now the gangs are coming together to fight off the government, right? And the state of Haiti is basically very, very bad. It's, it's the same level as Lebanon, right? It's a failed state. So if you want to change, right, you need to know what to change. We don't want a failed state, such as Haiti. So I hope to have informed you all long enough, and we'll see each other again tomorrow. Oh, and in the weekend on Sunday, we are going to another place, Arnhem, and we will be there at the Poppenkast. Yeah. So, bye-bye.